Little girl wrote to Santa at the corner office. The widowed CEO knocked on their door. It was the week before Christmas in a small town nestled beneath the snow-covered hills of New Hampshire. The streets shimmered with lights, shop windows glowed with wreaths and ribbon, and the air carried hints of pine and cinnamon. But in a crumbling apartment above a laundromat, Christmas felt far away. 6-year-old Ellie sat cross-legged on a worn carpet, tongue between her lips, gripping a red crayon. Her golden curls bounced as she carefully wrote, each letter larger than the last. "Dear Santa at the corner office," she began. She had overheard someone say that powerful people, people who could really fix things, worked in corner offices. And if Santa was real, surely he had one too. Her mother, Clara, moved quietly in the small kitchen. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, loose strands framing a tired but kind face. The sleeves of her uniform were dusted with flour from her early morning bakery shift. She hummed under her breath, not realizing her voice shook from exhaustion. The radiator had broken again. A space heater buzzed near the window, barely holding off the cold. On the table sat unopened bills, rent, heating oil, and a warning notice from the landlord. Clara glanced over. "Sweetheart, who are you writing to?" Ellie looked up, eyes bright. "To Santa, but not the North Pole one. This one works in a corner office. Maybe he knows more." Clara chuckled softly, though it was tinged with sadness. "Let me know if he writes back." That night, Ellie folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and scribbled across the front, "Santa at the corner office, important." The next morning, she dropped it into the large green mailbox outside the bakery, not knowing it was for company mail only. 3 blocks away, in a sleek glass building laced with ivy, the offices of Halridge Estates buzzed with holiday energy. Staff hurried through meetings, trees glittered in every corner, and the top floor, the corner office, belonged to CEO Graham Halridge. Graham, 42, stood tall in a pressed suit, dark hair graying at the edges. His office overlooked the town, a view he hardly noticed anymore. Since Anna passed, everything felt distant. Even Christmas. That afternoon, during a quarterly meeting with the finance team, an intern entered and handed him a stack of misrouted letters. One envelope stood out, child-sized, handwritten. Graham raised an eyebrow, opened it, and began to read. "Dear Santa at the corner office, I do not want toys. I do not even want candy. I just want a house where my mommy can stop crying. We try to be good. She works a lot and always gives me the last toast even when she is hungry. I want her to have warm feet again and to smile when she sleeps. If you are real, can you help? Love, Ellie, I am 6. The room fell away. Graham froze, the meeting around him blurring into background noise. He read it again. Then again. He pictured a small girl with sunlit curls and a weary mother giving the last bite of food to her child. "Graham?" one of the managers said, noticing his silence. He waved a hand. "Give me a moment." He stood, walked to the window, and held the letter gently between his fingers. It had been 3 years since Anna, 3 years since he sat beside her in the hospital as her body failed. Before the cancer, they had begun preparing to adopt a girl, around 6, with curly blonde hair. Anna had knitted a sweater for her. It still sat, untouched, in a drawer by the window seat. He had buried that part of himself. Until now. Ellie's letter didn't just stir memories. It broke something open. Not because she resembled the daughter they never had, but because her words held a purity no adult ever dared speak. A letter, misdelivered. Or maybe not. He looked again at the trembling handwriting. "Can you help?" He whispered into the stillness, "Maybe I can." The evening after the meeting, Graham sat alone in his office long after everyone had gone. Outside, the sky had turned the color of pewter, snow falling in slow, silent spirals. On his desk lay Ellie's letter, its edges worn from being opened and read too many times. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and, for the first time in years, let the memories come. Anna had always been the brighter half of their life together. Her hair was pale, blonde, like winter sunlight, and her laugh could fill a room. She painted in soft pastels, baked lopsided birthday cakes, and danced barefoot in the kitchen on weekends. She found joy in the cracks of ordinary life. She had wanted a child with a tenderness that moved him. "Maybe she'll have curls," Anna would whisper, curled beside him on the couch. "Golden curls that shine like yours." "My hair's not golden," he'd joke. "Then she'll get mine," she'd grin. "A little girl with bright blonde hair. I can see her already." But nature had other plans. After 2 failed fertility treatments, they turned to adoption. They filled out forms, sat through parenting classes, and finally got approved. One day, the agency showed them a file. Inside was a photo of a girl, no older than 5, with soft curls and a hesitant smile. Anna cried the moment she saw it. "She's the one, Graham. I know it." In the weeks that followed, Anna began knitting a pale yellow sweater with tiny white star-shaped buttons. She worked on it during chemo sessions, her hands steady even when her strength wasn't. On good days, she hummed while the yarn slipped through her fingers. On bad days, she barely spoke, but the sweater grew, stitch by stitch. "She'll wear this when she comes home," she said once, her voice faint but sure. Graham didn't point out how her hands trembled. As Anna's condition worsened, so did the timeline. The agency eventually called. They would have to place the child with another family. They were kind, but clear. They needed stability. They understood the situation. Anna didn't argue. She simply held the unfinished sweater to her chest that night and wept until morning. 3 months later, she was gone. After her death, Graham became mechanical. He rose early, buried himself in meetings and numbers, handled everything. Work didn't ask him to feel. That was the appeal. He stopped going to parks, skipped family holidays, ignored birthdays. Anything involving children was off limits. The house stayed immaculate, like a museum curated by grief. But he never got rid of the yellow sweater. It remained neatly folded in the bottom drawer of the window seat in his room, untouched, but never forgotten. Sometimes, when the silence got too heavy, he would open the drawer and look at it. He never took it out, just looked, then closed the drawer before the ache could rise too far. Now, in his office, the city asleep beneath fresh snow, Graham reached into his coat pocket and pulled out Ellie's letter once more. He traced the crooked lines with his fingertips, the simplicity, the hope, the rawness. She hadn't asked for toys or candy, just a house, so her mother could stop crying. That small, honest plea cracked something in him. A warmth stirred in a place long shut tight. He clutched the letter to his chest and leaned forward, breath catching. His shoulders began to shake. He tried to breathe through it, but he couldn't. For the first time since Anna's passing, tears rose. One fell, then another. He covered his face with his hands as a sob broke loose, deep, rough, pulled from a place long hidden. The little girl's letter blurred behind his tears. She didn't know him. She hadn't even meant for the letter to land where it did. But somehow, her words, those unguarded, childlike hopes, had reached straight into the coldest part of him, and they had woken something up. Something he didn't know still lived, and he could not, would not, ignore it. The next morning, Graham walked into the office earlier than usual. He carried no briefcase, no tablet, only Ellie's letter, folded carefully in the inside pocket of his coat. His assistant, Lena, was already at her desk, sipping coffee and scanning emails. She glanced up, startled. "You are never in before me," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" "I need your help," he replied, placing the letter on her desk. "I need to find the girl who wrote this." Lena picked up the envelope and read the letter silently. Her expression softened as she reached the last line. "Do we know anything else?" she asked. "Only this," he said, pointing to a faint pencil scrawl on the envelope. A partial return address, a street name, no number, no city, but it is local. I need you to find them. The child, the mother, both. Lena hesitated. Should I go through the agency we used before? No, Graham said quietly. This is personal. She asked no further questions. By afternoon, she returned to his office with a printed sheet and a knowing look. There is one apartment building on that street. Unit 4B, she said. Rented to Clara Winslow, single mother. Works night shifts at the bakery on Main Street. Daughter's name is Eleanor Winslow. Goes by Ellie, 6 years old. Graham stared at the name, running a thumb along the edge of the paper. Would you like me to call her? Lena asked. He stood. No, I will go myself. Clara was sweeping the entryway of their tiny apartment when a knock sounded, firm, polite, unfamiliar. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door cautiously. A tall man stood in the hallway, dressed in a charcoal coat, December wind still clinging to his shoulders. He looked utterly out of place in the dim corridor. Miss Winslow? He asked. She nodded, guarded. Yes? My name is Graham Halridge. He hesitated, clearing his throat. I believe your daughter wrote me a letter. Clara's brows drew together. I do not understand. He reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope addressed in Ellie's careful handwriting. She sent this to Santa at the corner office. It ended up at my desk. I run Halridge Estates. Clara blinked, baffled. This must be a mistake. Before she could say more, Ellie appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She spotted the envelope in Graham's hand, then looked up at him with dawning excitement. You are him, she whispered. You are Santa at the corner office. Graham gave a soft, disbelieving smile. I suppose I am. Ellie rushed forward and threw her arms around his legs before Clara could react. Ellie, no, Clara protested, cheeks flushing. It is all right, Graham said gently, lowering himself to one knee. Hello, Ellie. She leaned back to grin at him. You got my letter? I did. And it was the most important thing I have read in a very long time. Clara stepped between them slightly, still wary. Look, I do not know what you think is happening, but we are not a charity case. I know that, Graham said, sincerity steady in his voice. This is not charity. I simply wanted to meet the little girl who wrote something that reminded me what it feels like to feel. Clara hesitated, studying him. Something in his expression, perhaps the tired honesty, softened her stance. At last, she stepped aside. You can come in. Just for a moment. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A little tree with 3 ornaments stood in the corner. Ellie spread her coloring books out on the rug, eager to show him every page. And then Graham saw it, when the sunlight through the window brushed her curls, when she smiled up at him with bright, unguarded eyes. The memory hit him like a blow. The photograph Anna once held, the little girl they almost adopted. Ellie looked just like her. His breath caught. Time stopped. Not because Ellie was a shadow of the life he lost, but because here she was, real and alive, in a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of crayons and cinnamon. And she had called him Santa. The snow kept falling. Days blurred together with the kind of hush only December brings. Graham, still unsure of the why or how, had offered Clara and Ellie a place to stay, at least through Christmas. The guest house, nestled behind the estate beneath tall pines, seemed made for peace. Ivy climbed its stone walls, and golden light glowed warmly from its windows. It felt a world away from the cold, crumbling apartment Clara and Ellie had left behind. Clara had hesitated. She was wary, uncertain of his intentions. But Ellie, full of wonder, had tugged her sleeve and whispered, Maybe this is Santa's house too. Clara agreed, with one firm condition. I'll cook, I'll clean. I don't want to feel like a guest, she said, her chin lifting with quiet pride. Graham only nodded. From the first morning, something shifted. Clara woke before dawn, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun, sleeves pushed up as she moved through the small kitchen humming softly. Her eyes still carried the weight of too many sleepless nights, but they sparkled when Ellie came bounding in, asking for snowman pancakes with a giggle. One morning, Ellie tripped and scraped her knee. Clara didn't panic or scold. She simply knelt, cradled the child gently, and sang a lullaby so soft it stilled the room. Graham had stood quietly at the top of the stairs, frozen, not because of the melody, but because of how Clara filled the space around her with peace. He had never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, Ellie attached herself to Graham completely. Each day brought a new picture, a wild question, or a plea for help. They spent long hours together finishing a wooden ship Graham had started years ago but never completed. One afternoon, as the snow fell thick and soft outside, Ellie pointed to the carved figurehead and asked, "Who is she?" Graham paused. "A fairy," he said gently, "with hair like snow. She used to live here before she turned into stardust." Ellie gave a solemn nod, and later that night, she added a tiny paper crown to the ship's bow. Clara watched from a distance. She noticed the way Graham bent low to meet Ellie's gaze, how his hands were steady, kind. At first, she stayed guarded, but slowly, she began to see something more behind his stillness, something gentle. One evening, while Clara was upstairs putting Ellie to bed, Graham visited their old apartment. He'd already sent someone ahead with the paperwork. By the time he returned, the past had been erased. No more unpaid rent, no more heating bill, no eviction notice taped to the door. He never told her. But the next morning, under Ellie's pillow, he left a small card. The handwriting was steady, careful. "Santa always hears the wishes of the truest hearts." Clara found it later. She said nothing. But that night, as she tucked Ellie in, her hand lingered a moment longer on the blanket. Then the storm came. A blizzard swept through the town, knocking out power across the region. In the guest house, candles flickered, casting warm shadows. Graham built a fire, and Clara made cocoa, heating biscuits in a pan over the flames. Ellie curled up between them, eyes reflecting the soft light like stars. They spoke quietly, voices hushed. "I used to dream of owning a bakery," Clara said, staring into the fire. "Nothing big, just a little place with a yellow awning and a chalkboard menu." Graham turned to her. "What stopped you?" She gave a small smile. "Bills, life, Ellie. And somewhere along the way I stopped believing it could still be mine." They sat in silence, the kind that did not feel empty. Graham studied her face, how strength and softness shared space in her eyes. Ellie had dozed off in Clara's lap, thumb under her chin, golden hair spilling across her arm. Graham whispered, "You really do make this house feel alive again." Clara looked up, caught off guard, but his face held no pity, only quiet sincerity. She did not speak. She just smiled, faintly. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close enough. The days before Christmas drifted by like snowflakes, one gentle moment after another. The guest house was warmer now, not just from the fire, but from the laughter that echoed through its walls. Clara's cookies filled the air with cinnamon and clove, and Ellie never strayed far from Graham's side, chatting endlessly about snow angels and how maybe Santa had traded his sleigh for a corner office. But beneath the surface, Clara was changing. One afternoon, returning from the store, she passed the main house. Its front door was ajar, and from the porch, she heard Graham's voice, low and sincere. "I want to find a way for them to stay past Christmas," he said. "I don't want them to feel like this is temporary." He was speaking to Lena. Clara recognized the calm, professional tone of his assistant. Clara froze. Her heart fluttered with something unfamiliar. But then, just as quickly, it dropped. She stepped away before she could hear more. That night, her phone buzzed with a message from a former coworker she hadn't spoken to in months. "Careful, Clara. I know men like him." Rich guys don't give without wanting something back. She stared at the screen. She shut off the phone, but the words stayed. The next morning, she skipped breakfast with Graham and Ellie, saying she had errands. When Graham offered to help bring down holiday boxes, she refused. She began speaking less, smiling less, looking away when he looked her way. Graham noticed. So did Ellie. One evening, Graham invited them to walk the garden path, now lit with strings of white lights. Clara shook her head. "It's cold," she said, avoiding his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "I'm sure," she replied. "You two go." He nodded, but something in his chest pulled tight. He left with Ellie, who kept glancing back toward the guest house. That night, once the house was still, Clara sat at the kitchen table. Behind her, a half-packed duffel bag waited on the floor. She picked up a pen and wrote slowly, "Dear Graham, thank you for everything, for the warmth, for the kindness, but we can't stay. This world, it's not ours. Wishing you peace, Clara." She folded the letter, placed it on the table, and turned off the lights. Quietly, she packed Ellie's things: a few clothes, a stuffed bunny, a crayon drawing from the wall. She had just zipped the last pouch when a small voice behind her whispered, "Where are we going?" Clara turned. Ellie stood in the doorway, blanket in hand, eyes wide with sleep and fear. "We're just heading home," Clara said softly. Ellie's lips trembled. Her gaze moved to the bags, then back up. "Why?" she asked. Clara knelt beside her. "Because this isn't really our life, sweetheart. It was just a visit." Clara searched his face. There was no pressure in his voice, only something soft, vulnerable. She nodded. They drove in quiet through the outskirts of town. Pines lined the road, heavy with snow. The world felt hushed. When the car slowed and turned into the small cemetery near the woods, Clara's breath caught. She glanced at Graham, but he kept his eyes ahead. They parked near a path of stone markers, the ground blanketed in white. Graham stepped out and opened the trunk. He pulled out a simple bouquet of white lilies, wrapped in brown paper. Clara followed him through the snow-covered path until they reached a modest headstone. Anna Halridge. Beloved wife, bright soul, forever a light. Graham knelt and placed the bouquet at the base of the marker. He brushed away a few fallen pine needles, then stood silently. Clara waited beside him, her hands in her coat pockets, unsure of what to say. After a long pause, Graham finally spoke. She was everything you might imagine, light in every room, fierce in every fight. She made life feel like an adventure. His voice did not tremble, but there was a weight to it, the kind that came from remembering without being consumed. "We wanted a child," he continued. "We were weeks away from adopting. A little girl, golden-haired, quiet eyes. Anna had already knitted her a sweater." Clara's eyes softened. "But when Anna's health collapsed, I let the adoption go. I told myself I was protecting the child. Truth is, I was protecting myself." He turned toward Clara then, his eyes steady. "For years, I closed every door that led to anything resembling love. I kept busy, efficient, safe." He took a breath. "Until Ellie's letter." Clara looked away, blinking quickly. "But this is not about Ellie," he said gently. "She is extraordinary, yes, but it was you, Clara." Clara turned back to him, eyes wide. "You brought warmth into rooms that had forgotten how to hold it. You brought music into silence. You smiled at strangers, even when you were exhausted. You gave without ever asking for more." He paused, then stepped closer. "Anna is a part of me I will always carry, but she is not holding my heart anymore. That part woke up for you." Clara's lips parted, but she said nothing. Graham's voice grew quiet, but more certain than ever. "Clara, I thought I could never love again. I truly believed that. And then, somewhere between your laughter in the kitchen and the way you hold your daughter when she sleeps, I started hoping again. He held her gaze. I find myself waiting for your voice in the morning, for your footsteps down the hall, for the way your face softens when you're lost in thought. You are not Anna, you are you, and it is you I love. The cold air stilled between them. Clara swallowed hard, her breath visible in the winter air. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. She reached for his hand, took it gently, and lifted it to rest over her heart. Her voice was quiet, but clear. I am scared too, she said, but this, she pressed his hand just slightly, this is beating for you. And for the first time in years, Graham felt the weight in his chest give way to something bright. Not grief, not memory, but love. Living, breathing, undeniable. The days that followed the visit to the cemetery were quiet, but something between Graham and Clara had changed. Undeniably, gently, completely. There were no grand declarations after that moment. No promises made in haste, just a new kind of stillness. A peace. Clara moved through the house with a softer gaze, and Graham found himself looking up more often, listening for her laugh, for Ellie's footsteps on the stairs, for the sound of life returning to his home. But Graham had never been one for half measures, and love, true love, deserved more than just warmth. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Graham drove to the county office. It was snowing lightly as he stepped inside the small government building. The woman at the front desk recognized his name immediately. Still, he waited patiently, filled out each form with steady hands, and signed his name with quiet purpose. The paperwork was for a joint guardianship petition, not just financial support, not charity, not sentiment. It was a step toward permanence, toward family. The name on the form read, Ellie Winslow Halridge. Mother, Clara Winslow. Father, pending, Graham Halridge. He did not tell Clara, not yet. He wanted to show her, not with words, but with something real. When he returned home later that day, the house was filled with the smell of gingerbread. Ellie was in the living room, building a crooked tower of cookie tins. Clara was in the kitchen, humming again. He went upstairs to his office, pulled out a thick envelope, and wrote a note by hand. The ink paused only once. That evening, after dinner, Clara came into the sitting room to tidy up and noticed a folder sitting neatly on the old writing desk. On top of it, a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. Her name was written across the front. She unfolded it slowly. Clara, I know what it means to lose something you never thought you would have to let go of. I also know what it means to find something you never thought your heart would dare hope for again. I am not asking for a yes today, but I am letting you know that I am all in. I want to build a home, with you, with Ellie. I want to be her father, and I want to be your partner in every quiet morning and messy afternoon this life has to offer. If you are ready, if your heart says yes, I am here. Yours, Graham. She sat down slowly, heart pounding, staring at the papers beneath the letter. Ellie peeked into the room, clutching a crayon in one hand. Did you see the picture I made? Clara blinked, startled from her daze. Picture? Ellie ran in, holding up a sheet of paper. On it, she had drawn 3 stick figures, one tall with a tie, one with yellow hair and a bun, and one small figure with a smile so wide it nearly reached both ears. They stood in front of a white house with snow on the roof. At the top, written in bright red crayon, Santa is my daddy now. Clara's breath caught. She looked from the drawing to the letter in her hands, then to Ellie, who was beaming. Tears welled in her eyes, but her lips curved into a smile. It was not a proposal with flowers or rings. It was something deeper, truer. A man offering not just love, but a home. A father claiming a child with no conditions. And for the first time in years, Clara did not feel like she was standing in someone else's life. She felt like she was finally, fully, home. Snow blanketed the Halridge estate, glistening under the pale morning sun. Trees stood silent in the cold, their branches dusted with frost as if nature itself was holding its breath. In the garden, beneath an arch of evergreen branches, holly berries, and white ribbon, a small winter wedding was about to begin. It was simple, quiet, perfect. Only a few close friends and longtime staff were present. 2 rows of chairs lined the snowy aisle. At the front stood a tall pine tree, decorated entirely with Ellie's handmade ornaments, painted pine cones, paper stars, and one crooked heart that read, "Mommy plus Santa," in crayon. Graham waited at the altar in a dark winter suit, hands folded. But when Clara stepped into view, something shifted in his expression. She wore a modest white dress with long sleeves, the hem grazing the snow. Her blonde hair was curled softly, swept to one side, with a sprig of holly above her ear. She didn't look like a storybook bride. She looked real, steady, home. And to Graham, that was everything. As she reached him, he took her hand, then leaned in and whispered, "I'm not marrying the past. I'm marrying the future, and it's you." Clara's eyes welled, but she didn't blink. She wanted to remember every second. Ellie stood to the side in a white dress, cheeks rosy from the cold. She tossed dried flower petals into the air, watching them fall like snow. Then she twirled with theatrical grace, her skirt spinning like a snowflake. The ceremony was short, but no one there would ever forget it. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Clara and Graham turned to Ellie. She ran into their arms, and they held each other, laughing, breathless, whole. That night, after the guests had left and the snow muffled the world outside, the little family sat by the fire in the main house. Wrapped in blankets, they watched the flames flicker behind the glass. Above the fireplace, a simple wooden frame held Ellie's letter, the one addressed to Santa at the corner office. Beside it was a small photo of Anna, smiling under the sun, her pale hair lifting in the wind. Not a ghost, but a quiet blessing. Clara glanced at the photo, then at Graham. He reached for her hand. She gave it a soft squeeze. On the rug, Ellie lay coloring something with deep focus. After a few minutes, she stood, stretched, and handed Graham a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was neater this time, more deliberate. "Dear Santa at the corner office, you didn't bring me a toy. You brought me home. And love, that's more than I asked for. Thank you. Love, Ellie." Graham's throat tightened. He could not speak. Clara rested her head against his shoulder. Ellie climbed into their laps without a word, exhaled softly, and let her eyes drift closed. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something sacred settled over them, not just warmth, but peace, a kind of joy that had been earned. A little girl had written a letter from a cold apartment above a laundromat, and somehow it had found its way to the right desk. And love, at long last, had found its way home. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey of love, healing, and unexpected miracles. If Ellie's story moved you, reminded you that hope can come from the smallest voices, we invite you to be part of something meaningful. Please subscribe and hit the hype button to support the Soul Stirring Stories channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing emotional, soul-touching stories that celebrate kindness, resilience, and love. Until the next story, stay kind, stay hopeful, and let love lead you home.